Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Richard and welcome back to the weekly watch list video brought to you by DeepView. If you want more information about this charting platform and screener, definitely go ahead and click the link down below in the description, as well as popping up right now, and join the waitlist. With that said, let's dive into the 17 names on my wider list for this week, and I'll talk about what I'm looking for in terms of their patterns, as well as potential entries. Kicking things off, we've got ABNB, which just reported earnings and acted very strongly. It's now pulled back into the 21 EMA as well as this prior pivot area on declining volume. And I'm basically watching for reversal through this high as well as a confluence of the downward trend line here. This is very steep, so I wouldn't be surprised to see it just kind of base out here and need a few weeks to really set up a really opportune entry below that 144 level. But I like where it's overall in its life cycle, and we did see really nice volume on that earnings gap. And the market was kind of weak here, which could have contributed to this pullback. But if it's going to work, it's not going to make excuses. And I don't want to see it undercutting this low significantly or the 21 EMA. I'd love to see this 200-day moving average continue to flatten and eventually curl up in support. Moving on, we've got AI, which I'm sure a lot of people are watching. This was super powerful off the bottom. Now it's forming some type of consolidation, compressing a little bit. It's a little bit early here to see it just kind of explode all the way to all-time highs. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it move up, pull back, move up, pull back, and just continue to form out this base over the next few weeks. But I'll be watching this one pretty closely because the theme is interesting and the chart has really shown power based on price and volume. I love to see it reclaim this prior base, and that could be a potential entry to start build a position. And we'll have to see whether it continues to respect this rising 21 EMA. But definitely a name to have on your radar, especially if you like the more powerful movers that can be extremely explosive. CRUS, CRUS logic, semiconductors have been very strong. You can see this also had a really nice move up on volume. Now it's consolidating below, that 107, 108 area, pulled back into 102. So not much give back at all with the market. And it continues to remain above a rising 21 EMA, 50 and 200-day moving average. Scrolling back, you can see there's a pretty big base that it just broke out of at around 95. It's not the fastest mover, but I like this big move on volume, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it break through this pivot and continue to basically trend higher and eventually break through these previous highs. That is CRUS. Moving on, we've got ELF, which has been a leader in 2022 into 2023. It had a nice earnings gap up on large volume, moved up, and now is compressing a little bit as the market is pulling in and is acting extremely well, holding above these lows. You've got a downward trend line here, so you're watching for a push through here on volume. Moving on, we've got GFS. This needs a little bit of time, but after this breakout attempt, it did move down. Not huge volume on the sell-off, and recently you've got a big decline in volume as it continues to basically form a range here. So I'm watching for a little bit more development, and then for it to progress higher, reclaim that pivot. I love to see, tightness form tight closes or just an inside day before it manages to basically push higher here. But if it does break these lows, this definitely needs more time within the spacing period. But once again, I like where it's at within its overall life cycle as it's forming kind of the first mature consolidation after its IPO. So that is GFS, also in a potential leadership group and area. IBKR, if you scroll back, just broke out of a very large base and now is pulling back into that 21 EMA, compressing. You've got a downward trend line here. So I'm watching through for basically a push higher on volume. Looking at the earnings and sales, really nice growth is expected as well. So that's always good to see. And nice action on Friday, upside reversal. INSP did break down below this pivot, but nice upside reversal on a little bit of a pickup in volume here on Friday. So I'm watching for follow through and a breakout, basically a re-breakout through that prior pivot area. And once again, really nice growth is expected, I believe, especially in terms of sales growth, as you can see down here from these estimates. Moving on, we've got LTH. Focusing on the chart here, you can see a nice push up in terms of price and volume. Now it's compressing in that 21 EMA area, and you've got a little bit of a pivot forming here, basically a low cheat as it forms out a base below basically 20.5. So I'm watching for a push here higher on volume and nice support here off. I believe these are the IPO base highs, that area. So nice action here as it forms out a base up the right hand side of its institutional due diligence phase. Moving on, we've got Monday. This is potentially forming a bottoming base here. Needs a little bit more time. I wouldn't be surprised to see it continue to base out for a few weeks, but you've got a potential pivot a little bit early here But as I mentioned, I love to see it move sideways, really mature here, and basically hold above this prior pivot. Moving on, we've got NRDS, super powerful off these lows. Maybe needs, one more week, 2 more weeks below this pivot, but this could be one that just blasts through because of this huge ramp in volume. Really nice action, and once again, moving up the right-hand side of its institutional due diligence phase. NVIDIA, you've got this gap up on earnings, now pulling back into this prior pivot. Depending on how aggressive you are, you could use this HVC. Not the highest volume on this earnings gap, but definitely it's one of the kind of liquid leaders, and you've got a little bit of an inverse head and shoulders here as it progresses here towards the top of this prior base. Still has a ways to go and a lot of overhead supply in this area. You can see that this 208 to kind of 265 level, there's a lot of trading back in here. So that's definitely going to be a factor, but we'll have to see whether this can work through and chew through that overhead supply. RVNC, a biotech, so keep that in mind, but really powerful off these lows, now compressing. Got a little bit of a pivot forming around 34.5. Nice inside day on Friday and holding up really well despite the market. SGML, you've got a nice base forming, gap up within this base, now going kind of sideways, upside reversal action, nice volume coming in, and you've got a pivot basically at the top of this range that's forming. I love to see an inside day before it tries to break out here and push towards these all-time highs. You do have some basically downside reversals on this day and this day, so keep in mind it could be very choppy in this 37 to 38 area, and I definitely want to see huge volume on a potential breakout. SOUN, this is a lot lower price than the stocks that I'm usually putting on this list, so keep that in mind. This is probably the most speculative of any of the stocks on this list as of this moment, but huge ramp in volume, and I kind of put this on for anybody who likes those potential power plays off the lows. And you've got a pivot right in this area around 4 and change. Looking at this chart, you can see that Friday we are kind of in the downside wick area of this candle. And if you go to a lower time frame, to a 65-minute chart, let's do that. You can see that is kind of breaking down below the 3.62 range. You can see there's a tight range here to here, so you can basically buy it as it re-enters that range, but you definitely don't want to see it continue to break down. That would basically suggest it needs a lot more time. So more speculative, as I've said a few times, but a potential powerful mover, as you can see from these pushes higher. So if this is your style, go for it. If not, know your area of competence. Tesla, much more liquid than the previous name. You can see it's pulling back into that increasing 21 EMA. It is at a key level, as you can see, 214 or 206 is this prior low, which it's basically kind of natural that's consolidating at this point. You've got this downward trend line in focus, and I definitely want to see a push higher on volume. And on the top side, you've got 215 or so is these highs. You're still below the declining 200-day moving average, so that will also be a potential area of resistance. VTYX, another biotech. You've got this downward trend line here. It's compressing into that 21 EMA on a decline in volume, holding up reasonably well given the market conditions, and you're watching for a really explosive move higher. We are just above this prior base, and definitely a fast mover with big potential, but also the potential to give back a lot very quickly. So definitely want to manage risk tightly with this name. Lastly, we've got XM, huge gap up on large volume, now compressing right near the top of this base. Nice action here on Friday, upside reversal. It failed at this downward trendline break, but I'm watching for a re-breakout on large volume. Definitely want to see that volume come in, suggesting that institutions are interested in this name, and we'll just have to wait and see what happens. So that's pretty much a run through of my wider list for this week. Let me know your thoughts down below. What's your favorite of this list? What are a few names that you think I forgot or should be aware of? And if you did enjoy this video, make sure you leave a like down below, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys in future videos. Take care.